While the ground invasion of Gaza has begun, the airstrikes and mortar strikes against Hamas militants continues. And while this has been going on, we've been getting quite a bit of reporting from the front. One of the people reporting on the Israel-Gaza border is CNN International's Diana Magnay. She was talking with Wolf Blitzer, and we saw this just last night.
Rocket fire coming out of Gaza, which is easy to spot. We've also seen ground-to-ground missiles going in, flares over the northernmost part of the tip, and you can see another rocket going in from Israel, slowly making its way, presumably a precision-guided missile coming into the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and it seems as though the bombardment has been very much in Beit Lahia. Now, the sound that you are hearing here, we're on the top of a hill, and I think you can probably see there are lots of Israelis gathered around who are cheering when they see these kinds of Israeli strikes. And it is an astonishing, macabre and an awful thing, really, to watch this display of fire in the air.
So there in the video, you see her referring to the actual assault, the missile strikes, as awful and macabre. When she went on social media, she was a little bit clearer about what else she thought was awful. She tweeted this, since been taken down, but it said, "Israelis on hill above Sderot cheer as bombs land on Gaza, threaten to destroy our car if I say a word wrong. Scum." Referring clearly there to the Israelis cheering.
I guess they destroyed her car because she said missile instead of missile.
She did say one wrong.
I like that we took a lighter turn there. So now, you know what, in a bizarre twist here, this reminds me of the Anthony Cumia story from Opie and Anthony, when he got attacked and then he started calling everybody savages. But I think that it's different in a very important way, right? So he started referring to the entire black community. He said, this is what the black community does. They resort to violence. They do this, they do that, right? And here, I think it is, she's clearly referring to the people who are saying, we're going to hurt you if you say anything wrong.
Or at the very least, that crowd of Israelis very clearly cheering, as we see. We didn't just see the missile going across. We saw the explosion, and we know from just the past few days there's a very good chance that people died from that explosion. It's almost certain that if they did, many of them were civilians, and they were cheering. I mean, we saw it, we heard it.
Yeah, I don't think it's clear that she was talking about just saying the wrong word, although I think it was that and the cheering of a giant bomb going into a heavily populated area. And she was saying that act of cheering it is scum-like.
Right.
Does anybody being threatened? I mean, I guess we don't know really. I mean, being threatened is as well. But I think if you look at, listen, I agree. Whenever you see this celebration, it's really disturbing. But you know, maybe it does speak to the just crazy fear that these people live under all the time, and on both sides, the cheering of the bombing of the other side, what that would do to people to get them to celebrate that as if it's some sort of relief. It's just amazing, like it's otherworldly to us, and I think you know, I agree with her. I mean, scum. I would have put that there, and I don't think that she should have been taken. Well, maybe she should have been taken off that assignment because she does show some sort of a bias if you were going to take her off that assignment, but to just take her, you know.
So let's talk about that. So she has been taken off that assignment. I don't, is it biased to say, hey, you know, you shouldn't celebrate people being on the receiving end of that bomb? I mean, scum is such a strong word, so let's be, you know, fair about that. But on the other hand, if you
scud. Maybe it was,
it was just a typo.
It was just a typo, and that was it was a missile.
M and D are quite far from each other. I don't think so.
But let's reverse it. If Hamas had fired rockets, she was watching Hamas celebrate rockets that were landing on Israeli kids, and they were cheering, and she wrote, and they were threatening her, and she wrote scum. Does anyone in their right mind think she would have been taken off that beat?
Yeah,
it's possible.
I do. I believe that an organization like CNN would have removed somebody for using the word scum.
Really?
I do. I
That's
think
their balance.
for me, at least, there are two parts of this conversation. She is 100% morally exempt. She did nothing wrong. In fact, she's on the right moral side. Like, she reacted to how a human being would respond, especially to the guys who are winning and guaranteed a victory. Like, cheering is obnoxious. It shows a lack of respect for humanity. It was a limited number of people. Those people disgust me in every possible way. As a journalist, she's got a job to do. She can't write scum. That tweet works completely well without the word scum. Like, just write that tweet. They're threatening me, and they're cheering the explosions. Revealing information, interesting information. I would have left out the word scum. I'm glad they didn't fire her. They just moved her to another story. She'll be okay. But no one in their right mind should think that she did anything anti-Semitic in any way.
Yeah. I mean, maybe she wanted to say, like, somewhat lacking in empathy, but you run out and you have to go to the source and figure something out. But I mean,
to that point though, she showed a human moment, right?
Yeah.
And so I know in some ways it's not allowed on objective television news. And I get the logic behind that, although I don't necessarily agree with it. But remember, like, the greatest moments of network television news is when Walter Cronkite shows human emotion, when he cries over Kennedy being killed, when he says his opinion, which is that the Vietnam War is lost. And those are considered like the greatest moments in television. Now, of course, scum's an ugly word, right? So I get why you have the reaction that people have the reaction they do, and CNN does. And, you know, you guys outvoted me, and maybe you're right, that maybe even if she had said that about Hamas, which is considered terrorist, although some would have applauded and Fox News would have been outraged if she gotten taken off the beat, CNN might have taken her off the beat anyway, right?
I actually read it as she was really pissed that these people threatened her, not that they were celebrating. I mean,
I read it the same way.
Yeah, that
I read it the other way, but they both make sense to me. You know, I wish she had said something else, because then it would have been more interesting. Like, you know, I wish she'd said.
She didn't have room.
Right.
It was a tweet.
Yeah, she said an uncomfortable, ugly display here as this is happening. And then if they'd removed her, then I'd have, you know, then they couldn't quite. They can hide behind scum. You know.
But look, obviously in this case it seems more abhorrent, because basically they've packed, you know, almost 2 million people in a tiny little space, incredibly densely populated. Those people, I mean, the people cheering, they know what happens when those missiles go in. They're under no illusions that it's just hitting militants. And so when you're almost literally shooting fish in a barrel, basically, like you pack them in there and then attack them with overwhelming firepower, it's hard to watch that and not feel sick at their cheering. But I remember what happened when we launched our strikes in Afghanistan and Iraq. I remember on campus seeing people cheering that as well. And certainly we weren't targeting civilians in the way that they're clearly being targeted, even if not intentionally here. But we did lead to a situation in which far, far more civilians did die, and yet we cheered.
Let me respond to that first, because I'll give you the same response. We just had this conversation off the air.
I just wanted to rehab it.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. But the difference there, well, first of all, maybe there is no difference. And by the way, as you probably felt, cheering the strikes landing in Iraq or Afghanistan, I didn't cheer, and my friends didn't cheer, right?
Yeah.
The people I care about didn't cheer. So now, but I'm thinking back to the first Iraq War, where I watched it and I remember that sort of display and that sort of, you know, the shock and awe, right? Is that the second one?
Shock and awe technically was second one,
but we saw it on
CNN.
We saw it on CNN in the first one. And your impression is we're hitting Saddam's many palaces and military installations, and very clear military installations in Iraq. And that therefore, now we may have been wrong about that, but that's the impression, and that's obviously a much easier thing to cheer about. And if Israelis cheered the strike of a Hamas garrison of rockets, I'm not going to get on them for that, and I wouldn't get on Hamas for hitting an Israeli battalion moving in. Cheering the death of other people, especially in a complicated world like this, and then when you throw in the fact that it's 2 days, Wednesday, the 4 kids are killed on the beach. Yeah. Like, ease up. You're not good people. You're shitty people to do that. You just are.
So in the ground invasion, already with the missiles that had landed, there was over 200 people killed in the Palestinian territories, in the Gaza Strip, obviously, specifically. Now with the ground invasion, 27 Palestinians, as of this morning, were killed.
And they think 17 militants, at least. So that's Israeli says 17 militants, and so at least 10 civilians.
A baby, 2 children, a 70-year-old woman among the dead. There's just a heart-wrenching story out of The Guardian. Salem Antez, whose 29-year-old father, comes up to a reporter with a purple bag and opens the bag, and it's his dead son. And he says, "This is my son," right? So now the thing is, you've already seen in the press, you saw the 4 boys on the beach. Everybody saw the 4 boys on the beach. Yeah. So, and I don't think we're any less culpable. I understand Ben's points about hitting the military garrisons. It's true. We, especially in the first Gulf War, there was actually ground troops. We were hitting the troops. We were hopefully nowhere near civilians. But in that,
much more clearly defined.
Much more clearly defined. But in the second Gulf War, we killed nearly, at a conservative estimate, 200,000 civilians. So if anyone is culpable, we're culpable,
Well,
right?
just at least 200,000 civilians are dead. We didn't.
Right. Yeah. No, that's fair. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, 200,000 civilians are dead overall, and we had a large role in that.
The biggest, maybe.
Yeah, we started the war, and we killed a lot of civilians.
Right, but most of those people were killed in.
So if you started cheering when the invasion began to Ben's point, and we're clearly hitting garrisons, etc., that's one thing. But after you already knew all those civilians were dead, if you're still cheering as the bombs land in Iraq, or you're cheering now as the bombs land in Gaza, knowing that there are kids in bags. And so if she was working for us, I most certainly would not have relieved her of that duty, okay? Well, and I would accept that you're gonna have a human reaction when you see something like that. In fact, if you don't have a human reaction, I would question you. But we do it differently. And I know CNN's mission is different, right? And I know that they find any kind of display like that out of bounds. So I'm not on them like I was for NBC, which seemed to have taken a reporter out just because he reported the facts, which was outrageous.
In this situation, I was reading, because one of the stories about the removal of the CNN reporter about Magnay's today talks about the removal of the NBC reporter, whose name is pronounced
Ayman Mohyeldin.
That Ayman Mohyeldin was removed from covering Gaza. It says here, a day after Mohyeldin live tweeted as an Israeli airstrike killed 4 children near his hotel in Gaza. Many people were talking about that as it happened. And then posted and deleted a tweet critical of the U.S. State Department's response to that. That's a...
Yeah, I read that tweet on air.
You did? Okay.
Number one, it wasn't that critical at all. It just literally reported exactly what the State Department said and then said, discuss. That apparently was considered too critical of the State Department.
By critical, you mean encouraging critical thought.
And just for, I have nothing more to say except that when I say I understand that CNN would remove her for the use of the word scum, I think they'd remove it on the other side for the use of the word scum. But I think there's also a way they could have said, hey, don't do that anymore. Seriously, don't use language like that and let her stay. That would also be an acceptable response.